Welcome everyone to the channel and today's very special guest. I have Ian from Japan Seikatsu, a YouTube channel which I highly recommend that you check out if you have the chance because he's doing very, very good work over there in terms of coaching people who want to start their Japan journey, as well as the possibility of doing MBA and working in a Japanese company or interviewing or applying for the JET program or Japan Exchange Teaching Program. And he has a lot of experience in that area. So if that is something of interest to you, I highly recommend you go check out his channel. And I'm really happy to have him here today because I want to talk about his Japanese journey, and he has a really unique experience that he can share with us today. So thank you for tuning in. So Ian, basically, we are both JET alumni, and as such, we have somewhat similar experiences, but different at the same time. And the first thing that stood out to me when talking to you about your experience was that you actually had experience in Japan before JET. So could you start off telling us a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to be on the channel. So as you said, we are both JET alumni, and it's a program that I am very appreciative towards. It really did help make my Japan dream possible. The original passion for Japan, I had as a kid in the background this respect for Japan. It was things like just the family car. We had Japanese cars and they didn't break down. We had a Japanese tractor, a Kubota tractor, Nintendo, Sega, Japanese maples. My father had a liking for Japanese gardens. So this was always marinating in the background. There was a curiosity there. And then when I was in college, there was an opportunity to study abroad, and the opportunity was either Germany or Japan, and you didn't need to study the language. So for most countries at my school, you needed to do 2 years of language. So I thought, okay, well, Japan is much more different than the US, so I'll give Japan a try. And the language, of course, is impossible, but I am passionate about history and culture and economics. And the Japan story always inspired me because they, at the time, were the second largest economy in the world, very little with natural resources. Nonetheless, they were able to become such a large economic power. But when I went there, I had a wonderful host family, and my host mother didn't speak any English, and the host father didn't as well. So as a result, I really needed to start learning some vocabulary, and I was taking classes as well. And that sparked my passion. So I started learning the language, and I felt like I was in a whole new world. Japan was so different from the world that I knew growing up in the US. And that's really where my passion for Japan was started.
So you came as a student originally.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So I did one semester in my sophomore year in Ishikawa. It was in the city of Kanazawa, which, if your viewers have a chance, is a lovely place to visit. They've got one of the most beautiful gardens in Japan called Kenroku-en, and it's a nice sized city. It's about 500,000. So it's you know, as a study abroad student, it feels quite manageable. But if you go outside, it's you've got some beautiful mountains. And then my junior year, I did a semester at Kansai Gadai, which is in Hirakatashi, closer to Osaka. So you had access to Nara and Osaka. And so it was a different experience. I stayed in a dorm this time, continued the language journey, had a great time. I was a junior. But when you're learning Japanese, and I'm sure you've gone through these cycles, you go through ups and downs. And I started to feel, maybe Japanese is just impossible. So, and I'm getting closer to graduating college. I have student loans, and I was thinking, I need to get a job and I need to park this Japan dream. So I went back to college. I finished college. I started working at IBM. This was right after I got hired, was the whole Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, global financial meltdown. So it was a very turbulent time. And my dream for Japan just never faded. And so year in, year out, I kept thinking about Japan. I turned 25 and realized if I don't apply to the JET program now, I may never get to Japan. I had tried to get to Japan through IBM, but it was just too difficult. It was really, there weren't that many opportunities for, it's a very established business in Japan. They're mostly hiring Japanese. And so I realized the only way for me to get there was probably the JET program.
Well, first of all, Kanazawa, absolutely on the bucket list for me. I have not been there yet, and I really need to go. But the question that comes out of that for me is if someone was debating whether they should choose that abroad program in Japan or go to Germany or somewhere else, like why Japan? Why do you think that might be the right choice to make?
I think it really comes down to what you're passionate about. I think for some reason, the Japanese culture fits my personality. I feel at home
Mm,
there. It's, I feel that in general, people in Japan are very cognizant of others, very
mhm.
courteous, high levels of service, very thoughtful. And I always appreciated that. I wasn't fully aware of that when I first went to Japan. When I was making that decision, Germany versus Japan, it was really just there was a background interest, there was a background respect for a lot of the products that had come out of this culture, but it was also just luck that when I got there, I felt, wow, this is a match. I had been to other places, but this was the first place that I went to where I was like, I would love to live here. I
Mm,
really want to become a part of this culture. So if you can, as much as possible, I would suggest to your audience to try to drill down on what you're passionate about and find that place that maybe aligns with your personality type
okay.
and you explore.
I was a JET as well. I came on the exchange teaching program like yourself, but almost immediately after graduating university, which is pretty typical for most JET program participants. But for you, you actually entered the corporate world in the US before coming to Japan, which is not usual. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, it's I think when I started on the JET program, it helped in the sense that I had been working for a few years. So I had been working under, there were certain expectations at IBM. It tended to be longer hours, often felt quite connected to the work. We had
Hmm.
laptops and, a lot of travel. So you felt like you were always on. So when I started in the JET program, I think originally you were by contract allowed to leave at 4. I mean, I hear that now. I'm like, is that even possible? Maybe it was 5, but it was so early. I remember my jaw almost dropping, and I would sometimes go to the conferences, and we would have these discussions, and I would just be thinking, wow, the hours are really quite reasonable on the JET program. It's a great experience. So it it helped in that sense. I think just having a few years to think more about what is it that I want to do and to have that experience up front. Also, as I said earlier, I had some student loans, so it helped me to kind
Mm.
of get on some more solid financial ground, pay down some of those loans, get myself set up a little bit. And it also, this Japan dream, I wasn't sure if it was escapism or not, but if you're working for a few years and it doesn't, if it doesn't disappear, it's a good indicator that there's probably something more than just escapism there. So it was helpful in that sense as well. It would later be helpful as well because I applied to an MBA program after the JET program, so that work experience ended up being very important to getting into the MBA program because they required 3 years of work experience at the time. So then I had a recommendation to look at the program. It's called Hitotsubashi, and they have a MBA program entirely in English. And the focus of the program is to take the best of the East and the best of the West from a management perspective and combine them. And they're trying to produce graduates that are really acting as bridges, and it could be nonprofit or profit sector. And that really appealed to me. So that I was thinking of that throughout the JET program. And it was really a question of how long do I stay in the JET program before making that jump to the MBA program.
So when you were planning on doing this whole MBA situation, when you looked at that process, Japan versus going somewhere else versus maybe doing a distance learning program or something like that, let us know a little bit about that process and what you ended up deciding and why you decided on that one.
So I wasn't sure at the time. So I was looking at US schools and I was looking at some Japanese schools. And I decided I would try for both and see, where the dice land on in terms of destiny. And I didn't get into the US program that I had been applying to. It was a few actually, but I got into Hitotsubashi. And so
Okay.
that largely made the decision. And I think it was the right decision. Looking back, my passion was clearly for Japan. And I remember one of the programs I was applying to in the US, and I was at interviewing, and it was clear from my essays and my background that I was passionate for Japan, and they weren't really sure. We're not quite sure. It was in Texas, and a lot of connection to oil and gas, and so I was trying to say, well, Japan imports a lot of oil and gas, and we need bridges there, and there may be some truth to that, but it was a bit of a stretch. And I think at Hitotsubashi, they looked at my application and go, this is a natural fit for the class. So sometimes just, trying your best, throwing that fishing net out and just seeing which fish you catch makes the decision for you.
Well, then doing the MBA, like what was your vision of what came next then? So you got accepted by Hitotsubashi.
Right.
After that, what's coming?
A similar approach. So what I was thinking was the similar is, do I end up working in the US or Japan? I'll try for both. And there was an opportunity to do a full semester at Kellogg outside of Chicago. And during that time, I was applying for jobs in the US. At the same time, I was applying for jobs when I was in Tokyo. And the job in Tokyo was an internship that resulted in an offer, and it was a perfect fit. It was investment management on the marketing side. So it was really combining my interest of Japan investment management and marketing communications, which is very similar to teaching in my view, which is where I was coming from in the JET program. And then the job that I'd applied for in the US, I got to the final round, didn't get an offer. So once again, the decision was made, and I think it was the right decision. It's hackneyed. People say it all the time, but one door closes, another door opens. Looking back, I was clearly so passionate about Japan. It really made sense that I was in Japan.
I can understand and relate. And I feel like as you tell me that story, I feel like it was really serendipitous that ended up like that, because I don't know, I don't want to speak for you in any way, but for me, when I made my decision to do grad school in the States, while I was in the States, it felt like a kind of purgatory. Like I didn't really want to be back in the States. I still wanted to be in Japan. So I want to ask, do you have any real regrets that Kellogg offer didn't come through that would have taken you back to America? Like, do you really feel like having stayed in Japan was the right thing?
Yes, absolutely. It was an American-based firm. It probably was a good fit in where it is in the industry. But being in Tokyo, I mean, this is almost a childish dream. But when I first went to Tokyo, I saw these huge buildings. I felt like this is the future. And my dream was I would like to work in one of those tall buildings. I had no idea how to get there from the other end of the world. And I was able to work in one of those tall buildings. It never got old. I was there for 3+ years and with a view of Mount Fuji. And I was still pinching myself after, years of seeing it. It was, so no, I feel really grateful for the time. And I found that where I was able to add a lot of value was working for a Japanese company that was in the process of trying to globalize. So I
Mm,
felt that I landed at the right spot at the right time. Um, and I feel grateful for that. But you don't always see that when it's happening, real
yeah,
time. But
sure. That's
sometimes
true.
things happen for a reason.
Hmm. Well, tell us a little bit more about, I mean, I say tell us, but really it's tell me. I'm really interested to know about your variety of experiences because you lived in Kanazawa, you lived in Kansai, you've lived in Tokyo. So how has that been for you as an experience? And maybe talk about the differences of the living in each of those places.
Sure. Another item on your bucket list, I believe, is Shikoku, and I
Oh
had
yeah.
the privilege of spending 3 years in Shikoku on the JET program in Tokushima Ken. It was in the middle of Iya Valley. You feel very detached from a lot of the bigger cities, and it's great. You get to, I was teaching children, and then I would get my hair cut by their parents. And then I was teaching adults as well. We would do a Kiowa once a week at the community center, and I had one student that invited me to her restaurant every Tuesday, and I would, speak some English, and she would help me with some Japanese. And you develop these friendships that last a lifetime. And I still dream to this day of, well, it'd be really nice if maybe I can buy an Akia, fix it up, and your cost of living is so low out there, and it's really um, a nice pace of life. So
Yeah.
I have a very warm spot for the countryside in Japan.
You are not in Japan right now.
That's
And
right.
you're working for a Japanese company, but you've been sent abroad and you're having another abroad experience because you're not, back in America where you're originally from. So can you tell us a little bit about like where you are now and how that all feels in terms of having a new experience in a new country?
Absolutely. So I moved in 2018 with my company to London.
Hmm.
And at the time, there was essentially we were trying to build up the marketing function, which is a multi-year probably take 5, 6, 7 years to fully build out. So 4 years into that, and it's been great. I've learned a lot. It's really basically stretched me, which has been good for
Hmm.
growth. But you're right. It's been the second time in my life starting over. And when you do it, I mean, you remember this, it's like being a teenager again. You need a driver's license, you need that new credit card. You just start, okay, good. I got my debit card. Luckily, the language was, shared language, but I've got some colleagues from Scotland, and still, 3 years, almost 4 years in, I'm sometimes saying, I'm sorry, can you say that one more time? Uh,
Especially
so
after a couple of pints in the pub.
for sure. Well,
Yeah,
that's a great
yeah.
point. Like in huge cultural differences, one of the things that most surprised me when I came here was downtown London. Every day at lunchtime, there's people having their pints at the pubs,
Hmm.
especially on Thursdays and Fridays, and they're discussing business, and that's where a lot of meetings occur. As an American in the American business world, there's a wall between drinking and work, and I never saw anybody drinking at lunchtime.
Right.
And in Japan, there's a wall, but it's until like nighttime. Then
Yeah.
the drinking and the nomikais start.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it was very interesting to see the British approach, where they're a bit more relaxed, and with that pub culture, it still
Sure.
very much exists. For the most part, at my company, we're not doing that at least
Okay.
Monday through Thursdays. Maybe once in a while in the summer on a Friday, and you have a pint, you go back to work, and you're able to manage it. It still is strange to me though, where in Japan, if you go out for lunch, it's very quick,
Hmm.
and it's in and it's out and it's efficient because everybody needs to get back to work. Where
Right.
here, it's so much more lackadaisical that, it just keeps stretching on, and you start panicking. You're like, hey, I got to get back. I got to get back. And everyone else is just so calm and relaxed. It's, oh, fine, hour and a half, no problem. So
Yeah.
a different pace here.
Yeah. After Japan, that must be tricky because I know exactly. I mean, even in the university, it's like lunch is and then
Yeah,
back to
yeah,
class, and there's
yeah.
no time to dilly dally. What I kind of alluded to before, where I said when I was back in the States in graduate school, there's a bit of a purgatory feeling for me. Like I really wanted to be in Japan. You're working for a Japanese company, but you're not in Japan. How do you feel about that right now? Do you really wish you were here, or are you happy where you are?
A little bit of both. I always do miss Japan, but at the same time, I am enjoying my work here, and I do enjoy my life here. I've fallen in love with the English countryside as well. It's a beautiful countryside here. But I miss Japan. And, the last few years have been difficult because in normal times, I would be going back on a business trip. I'd be going back to see my in-laws, seeing friends. And so that connection to Japan would be much closer. Um, but having said that, the kind of what we're doing at work is a multi-year process. So in the medium term, I see myself here and fully enjoying it. It's great. You're close to Europe. It's still surreal to me when somebody says, "Oh, this weekend I'm going to Norway." Like, what are you talking about? You're going to Norway for the weekend? So that you just hop on a train and you're in France all of a sudden. So it's been wonderful. I've met a lot of very nice colleagues. It's incredible too. London is so international. There's within our company, there's probably 25 different nationalities in our office. So
Mm.
it's quite a international city. But at the same time, I do miss Japan. I think I will always be connected to Japan. I'll be going back to Japan at some point in life. My career may take me back there, so we'll have to see. But on that note, there's one thing that I observed here that your viewers may appreciate, which is the skill sets that you get in Japan work outside of Japan in terms of the working in Japanese companies. As you know, the attention to detail in Japanese culture
Mm.
is so high, and that's really appreciated. It becomes a differentiator when you're outside of Japan. And with our JET program connection, I've met a lot of people that are working in HR, as just an example, for Japanese companies here in London that did the JET program. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of other people in my company as well that did the JET program. So a lot of those people that had those skills or those passions for Japan, they end up finding work at Japanese companies that are outside of Japan, and it helps you keep that connection, which is appreciated.
That makes a lot of good sense. So I guess one final question I have for you then is you're from the US, you're in the UK now, you've spent a lot of time in Japan. Where do you see yourself 20, 30 years from now retiring? What's your ideal? Is it
Tough
Ia
question.
Valley? Is it in Nara? Is it in the English countryside? Where are you?
Yes, right now I think it's possibly the Japanese countryside, maybe English countryside for a close second. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, I think the Japanese countryside is where I would guess right now.
Okay. Sorry, America, you weren't on the list.
Yeah, we'll have to see, but I'll let you know if I'm close to Nara and we can meet up and grab a pint.
Well, for sure. When you come back to Japan, after the whole Corona situation is over, I'm in Yokohama. We'll be in touch. Be sure to look me up, and we'll go out together and maybe film another video and definitely have a pint together. So, thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to reiterate that if anyone viewing this video is interested in pursuing an MBA, you have an interest in Japan, or you are interested in getting into the JET program, Japan Exchange Teaching Program, I highly recommend Japan Seikatsu channel, which is where Ian can be found. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. It was really a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to having that pint together someday. So, are there any final words you want to offer for the viewers?
Just if you do have a dream about Japan, to go for it. It's
Yes.
as Paul and his channel shows, and some of the people he interviews, and same on my channel. There's many different ways to create a career connected to Japan. So I remember having an interest in Japan, I felt like, hey, I'm the only one. There's nobody to talk to. If you want to be a
Mm,
lawyer, if you want to be a doctor, there's a clear cut road to get there. Less so for Japan, but with today, YouTube, online, there's a lot of information out there. So
yeah.
don't give up on it.
Thank you so very much for joining us. And thank you to all of you who have watched this. If you've made it this far in the video and you have not yet hit the like and subscribe, what are you waiting for? This is the time. And go over to Japan Seikatsu channel and check out some of the videos over there. Be sure to like and subscribe on that channel as well. Thank you so much for watching this particular video, and I will catch you next time. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Bye.